Welcome to Charts Today for Monday, the 29th of June. I was off last week. I was training institutional clients in Dublin, big energy training firm there, long time updater user. And then I was in Northern Ireland for a couple of days as well. So back in the UK, and we start by looking at the dollar. We see an upside target here on the dollar index after a long period of going sideways, so that is quite significant. We had that target given on the 11th. We had an upside target not quite reached, and we have moved back below the cloud. So whilst this is quite a sort of interesting break, we do have targets in either direction, and it is still a hard call. And if we look at the very long-term chart, we can see again this is still slightly bearish. So despite having that upside target, the picture is a bit mixed. That means, of course, with an upside target on the dollar index, we have a downside target on euro dollar. And that stronger dollar has actually created a bit of a dilemma for the yen, where we're seeing weakness there, hitting that 162 level, that 160 level, the Bank of Japan effectively looks like they've given up intervening. Because it's just fighting a losing battle there. Sterling is set to go lower as well, and we can see here we have got targets in either direction. And if we look at Bitcoin, we can see here that we've got downside targets. Just really breaking this 60,000 level is going to be pretty critical for Bitcoin. And if we look at the 60-minute chart, we can see it is mostly to the downside, and we are below the cloud. A move below 58,000 would activate a target to 51,000. So crypto not looking strong there. We had quite a strong finish to the Nasdaq on Friday. If we look at the daily chart, if we look at the 60-minute chart, we can see here we still are below the cloud. So the key thing is that daily chart is quite key. And if we look at the S&P, we can see here also upside targets on the daily, and on the 60-minute still below the cloud. That high point reached a week ago, but if we look at the and the Nasdaq, we look at the short-term picture here, we can see that actually, start of the month was where we saw the high point. So really quite key there. We have seen the futures up today, so it does look like a better day. The UK market is down slightly, and the DAX is up slightly. So market's fairly sanguine at the moment as well. Asia, we saw quite a strong showing. Japan was up, but we can see here on the short-term chart, we are still looking a little bit bearish there. The longer term, the medium term chart picture is pretty good. And China and the Hong Kong, the Hang Seng was up 2%, so they're quite strong as well. But we've got downside targets there on that daily chart, so it's really a bounce off a move lower. And looking at the Sensex, this has been pretty bearish below the cloud on the medium term chart. Having activated that downside target, we are testing the cloud. And if we look at the very short term on the Sensex, we can see here we are still relatively weak. And if we look at the Aussie market, up 2/3%, and again we can see here just a sideways picture there, so really quite key. And if we look at the 60-minute chart, we are still struggling. Brent crude is up slightly this morning, WTI at 1%. That's still a bearish chart on the 60-minute. Despite everything that's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. We saw a big bounce in sugar last week, which was really quite interesting. So a big move off that 13 level back to 14. We've had a failed recovery before. That's the 60-minute chart. If we look at the daily chart, we can see that bounce in the context. It's still a pretty bearish chart below the cloud. And of course, if we look at the long-term chart, the picture here has been very bearish, having crossed the cloud. This is the weekly chart, and a move to new lows would activate a downside target below 10. We do have targets to 1130, so quite key there. Gold really has been very interesting. Big sell-off in gold. We've got a big downside target on the weekly. We're still above the cloud. If we look at the daily, downside target met on the 60-minute. Just a little bit of respite. We seem to be finding support at around 3,900. And silver down 1.3% today. That has looked pretty bearish as well, not looking as strong as gold on that 60-minute chart. If we look at the medium term, there's still some pretty compelling downside targets. We have seen relief in yield prices, so yield rates. This is the US 10-year, and most other countries we've seen relief as well. This new small downside target, so that has been a relief. Tech was mostly up on Friday. SpaceX, really interesting looking at the daily candles there. And of course, if we go to the 60-minute chart, you can get a picture. There we are below the cloud, and the 10-minute. This is the 10-minute with all the price targets. And you can see if we move below that 150, 148 level, which was the IPO price, then we activate a downside target to 139, let's say 140, and another one to 120. So that would be pretty bad news for SpaceX. Remember, you can follow them on your TradingView targets as well. So quite key there. But if we look at the downside targets there on the 10-minute is pretty compelling. We saw Apple were up 3%. Actually on Friday, what we saw is the stocks that are performing less well have actually they had the strongest performance on Friday. We had Nvidia down slightly, and that's looking a bit bearish on that back below the cloud, with quite a lot of downside targets there on the 60-minute. This data coming from LSEG, but again, you could be running on Metastock, which is effectively the same data source, and that's a really powerful way to run the data and to update it. Tesla were up 1.2%, and we can see here that we've got a downside target still, and we are below the cloud. Looking at the Dow, it was a case of the best performers were the worst performers on Friday. So the ones that are in strong uptrends, we're seeing big pullbacks. Caterpillar down nearly 6%. Cisco, again, another strong one down as well. And if we look at the best performers, Microsoft, Salesforce, these are stocks that have been performing pretty badly. They bounced on Friday. So Salesforce having really had a really bad year of downward pricing there. But we can see a big bounce there, but really a counter trend move. So really quite scary that. And in the UK this morning, we're seeing just a mixed picture, about half the market up, half the market down. So that's it for today. Do keep an eye on your 1-minute target, on your 60-minute targets for the short term. If you're invested in tech, you'll want to watch those just for key levels. Until tomorrow, have a great day. Bye for now.